Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Kellam, and I'll be your host today on Encounter. Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, and I presume my two guests will both wear ashes that day or during part of that day as a sign of humility, repentance, devotion. The beginning of Lent, marked by Ash Wednesday, is the beginning of what for many folks will be a time of preparation to move from ashes to the Emmaus Road experience. In order to fully experience the delight and the surprise and the joy of the festival of the resurrection, a friend of mine said, first you have to go through the shadows of Lent. For many folks it means packing up all the Alleluias in their hymn book and putting them in a box and not opening them up again until Easter. And the other folks are doing the math and saying, well, let's see, Ash Wednesday to Easter, that's more than 40 days. It's because we don't count Sundays during that period of the Christian calendar. Well, to help you think about Lenten practices or Lenten disciplines or ways to experience Lent perhaps in some different ways for you, I've invited two guests to join me as we talk about the meaning of Lent for us personally. So first, the Reverend Kimberly Chastain from the United Presbyterian Church in Binghamton on Shenango Street.
Yes.
And then Sister Rose Casaleno, who is the chaplain at the Newman Center at Binghamton University.
Yes.
So we have a Roman Catholic, we have a Presbyterian, and so we'll be looking at this from two different traditions. Let me begin by saying that as a kid growing up in Endicott, as a Protestant, back in the 60s, well, late 50s even, I didn't know much about Lent. Yeah. I think I knew about Maundy Thursday, and I may have known about Ash Wednesday, but we certainly didn't get ashes. The Catholics did that. Now things have changed considerably.
Yes.
What about you, Kimberly? Did you grow up?
I'm a Presbyterian lifer, and I can tell you when it changed, because it was when there was the Council on Church Union in the 70s that Protestant denominations agreed on a common liturgy and a common set of holidays in the church year that everyone would follow. And we became, instead of being kind of a make it up as you go along church, we became a liturgical seasons church, and people are still mad about it.
Yeah. Well, and we adopted the
why can't we sing all the Christmas carols between Thanksgiving and Christmas?
Right.
Why do we have to do this Advent thing?
They're playing them in the mall. Why can't we sing them in church?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the Lenten experience is fairly new for mainline Protestants outside of the Anglo-Catholic tradition.
Yeah. And this came after Vatican II, right?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So about the time the Protestants were adopting this more liturgical calendar, the Catholics were going through the renewal of Vatican II.
Right.
So we share Lent.
We do, and that is the beauty, I think, of all the ecumenical processes happening, that we are more in line than we're not. And we're all on the journey together, and so we share those practices. And I think that for most of us, it's Lent just becomes a way to start our renewal, and that journey of opening ourselves up to receive the risen Christ on Easter.
Yeah.
So.
And so this is a 40-day period, and why 40 days? What's the magic? Lent is not in the Bible, but the 40 days are.
Jesus was 40 days in the wilderness, preparing for his ministry on earth. The people of God were 40 years in the wilderness, preparing to enter the promised land. It's a number with a lot of spiritual significance for Christians and for people of the book.
Yeah.
And so, and also, as you said, you take the celebration of the resurrection out every Sunday, and that's how you end up with that number.
Yeah. And so that time of preparation, we create for ourselves perhaps a wilderness between now and Easter in some ways, simplifying life perhaps. There are lots of different practices that will enrich that journey. Originally, Lent was preparation for baptism, wasn't it? For the new converts.
Yes.
In the early church, they would have a whole year of preparing to be initiated into the church, and it was mostly adults in the beginning. So when that last 40 days was intense preparation, because the church Christians were being persecuted, from the Romans. So it was you were really committing to what you were going to be baptized in.
Yeah.
And so that kind of became the tradition before, comes from.
Well, when I was growing up, all I knew of Lent was that my Catholic friends would come to me and say, "What are you giving up for Lent?" And I'd think, "Oh, is it Lent again? And is it gum this time, or soft drinks, or what?"
Chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate is a well-known Lenten discipline. But now that I'm putting away childish ways, and I'm thinking about ways now to think of Lent as more than just giving up something that I could probably do without anyway. What would be your favorite, if I can use that word, or the most meaningful Lenten discipline in your life, Kimberly?
Well, we try to emphasize the teaching aspect, so it's a part of the transformation. How do you make a space for resurrection or new life? And so we tend to look at disciplines that will do that. In fact, in our worship life this year, we're going to be doing different prayer disciplines. So one week we'll be creating a prayer box that intentions will go into, and one week we'll be walking the labyrinth. And the idea is to find different ways to be open to the Spirit of God and to the movement of God in your life. And that's one of I try to learn about prayer every year during Lent because it's so essential, but it's so easy to get out of the habit of if you don't have a long block of time to do that.
Yeah, or my habit would be just before I fall asleep at night, I go through my litany of little prayers, and the idea of thinking about all the different kinds of prayer and meditation, that'd be a wonderful way to move through these 40 days.
Yeah.
And we should talk a little bit more in depth about some of those, like the labyrinth or breath prayers or something. How about you, Rose?
For me, Rose? I think as a Catholic Church, we emphasize, the prayer, the fasting, and the giving. So it leads to like a freedom. Prayer is a freedom to open yourself up, to build that relationship with God. And, giving is a compassion. You give your alms. So even as a young person, we got our little boxes in school. You had to put your quarter in. And so today's people still do that, even though it's simple, but it can add up and it helps the poor. And then we also, for the aspect of prayer, when we increase, like we put in devotions, so Stations of the Cross, some people may meditate more, have open meditation, so there's different types of prayer as well that can be incorporated, and and taking the time yourself to be, whether it's in your car, just to think about taking the time to remind yourself that God is with you even in the car when you're driving and you're getting frustrated at the person who's cutting you off. So
trying to use a breath prayer instead of that other language.
Yes. So, and for myself, it's more about, when I went to Catholic school, so, you had to give up the candy, the gum. But I think as I've matured in life, that, to open ourselves up more is, thinking about who's treating you wrongly, or how are you reacting? Am I reacting with love or how they're treating me? So I try to be a little more compassionate or understanding, and it's also with myself, because it starts with ourselves. So I can hopefully that's where I start to relax and open and see what can I give up that helps me with that behavior, or gossiping, or those things we don't think about because we do it, or even the language we use, or the TV shows. So there's all different, because that falls into fasting as well, because when you say fasting, people think, oh, you're going to not eat all day. But it's just thinking about what you're eating and how you're eating it. And so it all slows you down.
Yeah. Let's talk about fasting for just a moment. The idea of not eating a certain thing or fasting maybe one day a week during Lent, or I'll have to tell you, I tried fasting once. And I was going to fast one day a month. And I got so ornery that my wife asked me to stop.
Well, and maybe that's part of what you have to pay attention to when you're fasting. I learned about fasting in Russia, in the Russian Orthodox Church, when I was a guest there in 1983, because in the Orthodox tradition, the period of Lent is the Great Fast, and they give up all milk products and all meat products and eggs, which is a pretty boring diet for most Americans.
Yes. Yeah.
But what it does is it forces you into a plant-based diet, which is a different way of seeing the world, and it's also a way of letting yourself know that not everyone has what you have.
Sure.
And so I came to appreciate the self-control it takes not to take it out on everybody else when you're fasting.
Yeah.
And a fast doesn't have to be a complete deprivation for a day. It can be fasting from white flour and white sugar, or fasting from eggs or meat-based products, or there's a range of ways to do it. It's to get your mind around the idea, and again, to make changes that will hopefully be lasting in your life and make you more aware of what you're eating and what you're using the gifts of God for.
Sure, and the idea of using that period of Lent to teach you about yourself, then that discipline can continue on, because isn't that kind of what we'd like to happen with all of the Lenten practices? That if we give during Lent, maybe we should be giving after Easter as well, and through Pentecost and so on.
Right.
Have you fasted?
I have. Because for Catholics anyway, we're called to fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. So those are the two big, and then we abstain from meat on Fridays during Lent. So in my younger days, it was easier to drink the water all day. Now, they don't say, no food. It's just, you can have 2 small meals, and, even your dinner meal, say it's not as large as what it would be. So fasting, like Kimberly said, it means it's all different ways.
Yeah.
But what they ask is just no meat on Fridays.
Yeah.
So that's the fast of it. And really, meat today isn't that big of a deal for a lot of people, because we have options for so many different kinds of food now.
Sure. We live in a country that is just filled with more options than most folks can imagine.
Yes, and the meat came from, I believe, is because of in the old days when meat wasn't really readily available. Sorry. And so fish was, you could have fish on Fridays, and so that's kind of kept in the church tradition.
Sure. Our guests are Sister Rose Casaleno, who is with the Newman Center at Binghamton University, and the Reverend Kimberly Chastain, who is the senior pastor at the United Presbyterian Church in Binghamton. And we're talking about Lenten practices. We've been talking about fasting, and I think that's one of the first things maybe that comes to mind. We've also made some references to prayer. There are some devotional guides that come out around this time when maybe you go to church and there's a Lenten devotional guide of some sort. This helps